So the next little section in this booklet is all about the different types of blood vessels. So in your body, you've basically got three types of blood vessels. You've got arteries, veins, and capillaries. Now, for arteries, the important thing is that they carry blood away from the heart, whereas veins will carry blood into the heart. Capillaries are basically where the exchange of substances take place, and they are found in tissues all over the body. So here you can see in the body, we've got the heart here, right in the center, and then we've got little blood vessels that go out, so they're the red ones. You can see that they go all over the body. So we've got the big aorta, which goes down the center of the body here, splits off into the two legs, and that's shown with the little red blood vessels here. You've also got arteries going up into your head, loads going out around here to your digestive system, and your liver, and your circulatory system, and all that. You can also see there that the little blue parts, which are these here, they're the veins, and they're going to carry blood from the tissues back up into the heart. These capillaries you can't see because those are microscopic, so they're not shown on this image. So this just shows how the three blood vessels are connected. So in this part of the diagram, we've got the arteries, and if you imagine that this is blood coming from the heart, or as we said before, away from the heart, it'll be carried in arteries. The arteries will branch off into smaller arteries, and then when they reach the tissues, so let's say for example they reach the tissues in a muscle, they're going to branch off smaller and smaller into microscopic capillaries. They're going to deliver all their oxygen and all their substances to those tissues, and then they're going to send all the waste products and all the deoxygenated blood back in here, and they're going to join up to form veins, and that's going to go back to the heart. So that's how the three are connected. Okay? Now, the next wee part is, why are there different types of blood vessels? Why do we even need that? Well, the main reason is that each blood vessel has a different job to do. So the artery has to carry blood away from the heart. So it's adapted to allow blood to flow at high pressure, because it has to carry it at a high pressure because it's just been pumped out of the heart, and it needs to go the whole way around the body. The capillaries are adapted slightly differently. They are adapted to allow the exchange of substances between the blood to the tissues, and they also need to send the waste products from the tissues back to the blood. So the capillaries are adapted to allow that to happen. The veins then, their main job is to carry blood back into the heart, and they need to be adapted to keep blood moving or flowing in the right direction, which is back to the heart. Now, that's important because when the blood is coming back to the heart from the rest of the body and even the lungs, it's coming back under a really low pressure. So there is a chance it could flow backwards. So what we're going to look at is how the vein is adapted to stop that happening. So that's why we need three different blood vessels. We need an artery to carry blood away from the heart at high pressure, capillaries to transfer the substances to and from the blood in the tissues, and then we need veins to carry the blood back to the heart under low pressure. Now, if we look at each one in turn, looking at arteries here, they've got thick, elastic walls to withstand high pressure. Now, what that basically means is, when your heart beats, so say for example you put your finger on your neck, you can feel your heart beating through your pulse. So what basically happens is, if this is your artery a pulse will move through it and you'll basically get a bulge. And that bulge in your artery is the blood that's left the heart in those little pulses. So because it's left in those pulses, they're under very high pressure. So your arteries need to be able to stretch to allow that to happen. As well as that, they've also got a narrow lumen to maintain pressure. Now, everyone's seen this in real life. If you've ever had a hose and put your finger over the edge of it, it shoots the water out under a very, very high pressure. So in this case, the arteries just have a very, very small lumen, which is this bit in the center, this part, and that maintains the high pressure to make sure that the blood will get pumped to where it needs to go as fast as it can go there. This part here is the elastic wall, and that's just to maintain the high pressure by stretching as the pulses move through it. Veins are slightly different though. Veins have got thin walls, but their lumens are much bigger. Okay, so here we've got thin walls and a large lumen. Now, by having a thin wall and a wide lumen, it allows blood to flow very easily. As well as that, they've also got valves to ensure the blood flows towards the heart. Now, if we have a look at these cross sections of the vein and the artery, this is what we can see. Now, this is a vein, and we can tell that because it's got a thin wall and a large lumen. Whereas we can tell that this is an artery because it has got a thick wall, which is this part to this part. So it's got a thick wall and a small lumen. Now the reason why they need to be different is blood in the vein is going to go at low pressure, but blood in the arteries is going to flow under a very high pressure. So it needs this thick wall to maintain the high pressure. Now capillaries on the other hand, remember we said that these are microscopic. Now in case you don't know what that means, it means that you need a microscope to see them. Now these are found in the tissues all around the body. So literally everywhere in your body has these. Your brain has them, your leg has them, your skin has them, your muscles have them, your stomach, liver, lungs, everything. Now the thing about those is they've got very, very thin walls which are leaky and allow the exchange of materials between the blood and the cells. So as we talked about in the first little video, we talked about the alveolus. It's got capillaries around it and they are leaky to allow oxygen to travel from the lungs to the blood and carbon dioxide to travel back. As well as that, we would have looked at capillaries in a villus, where they go up the centre of it. And in there they've got thin walls as well because it allows glucose to move really easily into the blood. Now, just to show you another wee bit about these valves here. So, if blood was travelling back this way to the heart, these valves are basically here to stop blood flowing backwards. If the blood was flowing at a really low pressure, what would happen is these valves would close and the backflow of blood would be prevented. So the blood can't get past these valves. So just to compare each one, if we go through this step by step, in terms of wall thickness, the thickest one by far is the arteries. They've got a really thick wall, whereas veins have a very thin wall. Capillaries, their walls are only one cell thick. The presence of muscle and elastic fibres. Arteries have, we're just going to say they're present, but they're also very thick. Okay, so that's what is making the walls very thick. Veins, on the other hand, are very, very thin, but they are still present. So they have muscle and elastic fibres, but they don't need as much because the blood is flowing at low pressure. Capillaries don't have them at all, and the main reason for that, they're one cell thick. So they don't have muscle and elastic fibres because there just wouldn't be space. In terms of pressure, the arteries have blood flowing at a very high pressure, whereas the veins flow at a very low pressure. Capillaries are also low by the time the blood gets there. The only one that has valves is veins. So that's an easy thing to remember. Veins have valves. The nature and direction of blood flow. So the arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood back to the heart, or what's easier to remember is into the heart. The capillaries then link the arteries and veins and are found in the tissues. Now, levels of oxygen in the arteries is usually high. There is an exception to that. And in the veins, it's usually low. But again, there is an exception to that. So I'm going to put a wee circle beside that one. Now, levels of carbon dioxide in arteries is usually low. In veins, usually high. Capillaries can be a mix. And levels of carbon dioxide in capillaries can also be a mix. Now, the reason why this one, we're putting this little star here, is because usually arteries have lots of oxygen, except the pulmonary artery, which we'll look at in the next part. Veins usually have low levels of oxygen, except, that would be good if I could spell that, except the pulmonary vein. And then levels of carbon dioxide, again, arteries usually have low levels of carbon dioxide, except the pulmonary artery. And veins usually have high levels of carbon dioxide, except the pulmonary vein. Now, if we look at this just shows you a microscope image of arteries and veins side by side. So, what we can see with this one here is that this is an artery. Now, maybe I should change pen colour here since this is quite red. So in the centre here, this part, this is the lumen. This part here, this section, is the thick wall. In fact, that's a terrible colour to use to write in that. Is this any better? That's its thick wall. This bad boy over here is a vein. This is its lumen. Again, we're going to have to change pen here. This is its lumen. And this is its thin wall. So here's another diagram or another microscope image. So we can see here that this is an artery. So this whole area here, from here to here, is the wall. It's very, very thick. In here is the lumen. So this is the lumen in here, and it's all this area. In there is a wee cluster of red blood cells. If we look at this part, this is the vein, the white area is the lumen, and again this is a very, very thin wall. Here's another one. So what you should notice about these is that in all these photographs I've showed you, the veins have this big massive lumen with very, very thin walls. And the arteries always have thick walls with a smaller lumen. And you can see it really clearly on this. The way the lumen of this vein is massive. And yeah, fair enough, this looks like a big lumen of this artery. But if you were comparing these two, the lumen of the artery is much smaller. Now, just to finish this bit off, there's a few wee questions about it. These are typical questions based on this unit. How does the structure of arteries and veins differ? Arteries have got thick walls, lots of muscle and elastic tissues, small lumen and no valves. So there's lots of things you can say here. Whereas veins have thinner walls, little muscle and elastic fibres, large lumen and valves. Now, it's important to realise that that's the structure, okay? Sometimes you can get asked about the structure and how they differ, or you can get asked about the composition of blood, which we'll get to. So, if you're talking about the structure, you talk about things like their walls, valves, and lumen. Now, how does the composition of the blood in the arteries and veins differ? So, to answer this question, you basically need to think about where they're carrying substances to. So, the arteries usually carry blood away from the heart to the body. So, they're going to have things like glucose, oxygen, amino acids, whereas veins will carry blood back into the heart. And also, when that goes back into the heart, it's going to go to the other organs, which are going to get rid of the waste substances. So generally speaking, in the veins, there's going to be waste substances. For example, carbon dioxide, urea, and water. Okay? Which is exactly what we're saying here. So blood in the arteries has oxygen, not much carbon dioxide, and it has dissolved food, such as glucose and amino acids, whereas blood in the veins is deoxygenated, has lots of carbon dioxide, and urea. Now, what's the function of the muscle and the elastic fibres in the artery wall? When the artery walls expand after a pulse of blood, the elastic fibres recoil and the muscles contract. It narrows the lumen and maintains the high pressure and smooth blood flow. Okay, so the key there is that the elastic expands to allow the pulse to go through, and the muscles contract, and that pushes blood through the arteries and maintains the high blood pressure. Now, the elastic tissue also prevents bursting. So generally speaking, we associate things which are elastic with things that can stretch. So by being allowed to stretch, it stops the arteries bursting. Now, which vessels contain valves and what's their function? This bit is pretty straightforward. Veins have valves, and it stops blood flowing backwards in low pressure. Now, how is the structure of capillaries adapted for their function? The walls are very thin, so it means they're permeable. Now, we could also associate that with a short diffusion distance of substances, and it allows the diffusion of oxygen, carbon dioxide, dissolved food, and urea across the walls. That's the end of this section. Bye!